Ever feel like you got steam coming out of both ears? That's how I feel right now. You're going to find out why in just a second. What's up, everybody? Thomas Brandon here. Welcome to another gaming video. Now today we're diving back into motec. That's right, the telemetry software that is a rabbit hole from which there is no return. Now, really quick, I've had a lot of people since the last video that I did on the wings. I've had a lot of people message me, leave comments, email me, send me stuff in Discord, everything, asking me questions about, hey, how do you bring up the dynamic weight loads? How do you bring up, this? I can't find this. Really quick, just so you know, that is stuff that I created. Okay, dynamic weight loads. The thing I'm going to show you today, the traction efficiency and the theoretical speed and all that stuff like that. Those are all formulas and maths that I created. I have spent probably 12 hours working on this. And so it's a lot. It takes a lot. Now, I've had people ask me for this workbook. I'm very sorry. I cannot give this away. This is a bonus that I'm giving to the members in the Road to Pro sprint car training that I'm doing. If you want to actually learn more about that, you can go to schoolofsimracing.net/pro. But this thing is it's a lot of work, and it's like I said, it's a bonus in a program that costs a couple $100. So I'm sorry, I cannot give it away. One of these days I will do a video on how to build this stuff, but that is a ways away just because the information it's crazy. It's just crazy. So that being said, what are we talking about today? Well, today we're talking about gear ratios. Now, understand we're looking at one car on one track. Okay, so we're looking at the 410 sprint cars, wing sprints at Volusia. And what I did is I did a couple of test runs. I got some data. I'm going to show you the data and we're going to look at it. Now, I compared two gear ratios because one of the things that the pros will say, a lot of the top drivers, is you'll hear them say, on all the big tracks, you run a 486. On all the small tracks, you run a 534. Now, I don't personally do this. I change my gear ratios a little bit because I'm of the belief that my driving style is going to affect my gear. But I wanted to see if there was some data that I could actually accumulate to prove this theory. Or maybe, if I'm doing it wrong this whole time, I'll find out. So I went out and I tested identical setups, same wing angle, position, fuel, everything. The only thing that was changed was the gear. I did a 486 gear and a 506 gear. I did it on a clean track and I did it on a slick track, on a 60% track. Okay. Now on the clean track, I just did basically just through the middle. All right. I didn't want to have the line be affecting it or anything like that. So I just ran right through the middle, literally tucked my arms in and turned the steering wheel about that much, just letting the setup and the car do the rest. On the slick track, I did 3 laps around the top, 3 laps around the bottom. All right, no braking, just throttle, on and off the throttle, and got the data. All right, so let me pull it up real quick and I'll show you what we're looking at. Now, what we've got here first is we've got the colored lines that you see. Those are with the 486 gear ratio. The white lines are with the 506. And this is on a clean track, okay? Clean track, 7 gallons of fuel. All right. Now, what we can find here is when we look at this, you can see that overall the speed is pretty much identical, okay? At least in terms of the wheel spin and lock. Now, when we look at acceleration, once we get up to speed, we're up to speed and we're basically maintaining it. So we have a couple of different things here. First of all, we have what's called ground speed. That's just how fast is the car going, right? Motec measures how fast the car is going on the track. Now, we have two other speed elements here. One is the left rear theoretical speed. The other one is the right rear theoretical speed. What is theoretical speed? Theoretical speed is a calculation based on the horsepower, right? It's basically the horsepower and RPMs of your motor. You factor in the efficiency of the drivetrain, right, based on the number of axles that you have, the efficiency of your rear end, and then the tire circumference and diameter, all this stuff. You factor all this stuff together, okay, to get a theoretical speed at a certain RPM. So, for example, with a 486 gear ratio running the tires that we have, which is a 105-inch right rear tire, all right, with 12 inches of stagger, so that would be a 93-inch left rear tire, okay, in terms of circumference, right? If you look at the diameter, it's like 33 inches, and I can't remember the other one, but it's all in here. It's all based on the math. All right. When we look at that, okay, at, for example, at 7,900 RPMs with a 486 gear, our theoretical speed on the right rear is 153 miles per hour. On the left rear, it's 136. Keep in mind, those numbers are always going to be different because they're two different sizes. All right. But when we compare that data set to the other data set, which is the same thing, but with a 506 gear, at the exact same place in time, we're turning 8,085 RPMs, and our theoretical speed on the right rear is 151 with 133 on the left. So we're 3 miles per hour lower in terms of theoretical speed. And what that equates to in ground speed is almost a difference of 2 miles per hour. When we look at this based on the average over the course of the entire 3-lap run, those numbers stay the same. It's about a 2 mile per hour drop off in terms of the theoretical speed and about 1.5 miles in terms of the actual speed. All right. So when you're on a tacky track, right, or fairly tacky track where we're looking at, just being wide open, keeping it straight in a wing sprint car, okay, 410s, big track, 486, that's what you want. The RPM range, from what I can find, seems to be around 7,900. If you can average about 78 to 7,900 RPMs, that seems to be that sweet spot, okay, in terms of maximizing your horsepower and then also putting that power to the ground. You go out and turn 7,900 RPMs and you're just spinning your tires in the slick. Nothing good is going to come from that. But on a fresh track where the grip is basically just everywhere, that seems to be the zone that you want to be shooting for. Now that's going to be you topping out at about 8,300, 82, 8,300 RPMs. Keep in mind when you turn in, it's going to be about a 1 to 200 RPM jump, okay? Just because you turning in and the little bit of wheel spin that's going to happen. So that'll spike up a little bit. But overall, when if you're looking at your tack, it's going to be somewhere right around, 81, 82 going into that corner. And then the spike up will put you up to like 83, 84, somewhere right around there, okay? But that's about the range you want. You want to be hitting, right over 88,000 RPMs, 8,100 as you're entering into the corner. That should give you somewhere around an average of 7,900, 7,800, which seems to be that sweet spot, like I said, on a fresh track, okay? When we look at the 506 gear, we were averaging 8,145 RPMs. And we had a definite drop off in speed. So basically, we're getting a lot more, use out of that motor. We're winding it up more, but it's not equating to nothing in terms of that range, that power, that speed. We've gone past it. All right, we have reached a point of diminishing returns. Okay, so even though when you've got that 486 gear, it might sound like you're bogging coming out of the corner. Apparently that's right where you want to be. Now these cars, these 410 Sprints, have over 700 foot-pounds of torque. So I mean, you've got plenty of oomph to get up to speed, right? It's not like you're driving with a parachute behind you. Well, you got one on top, I guess. But anyways, so that's the difference in terms of the fresh track. So fresh track, big track, throw the 486 gear in there. Now for the smaller tracks, I'm going to just tell you right now, I did a ton of testing, even on a fresh track. That is more driver specific and preference. Meaning, if you are somebody who can go to Kokomo and you can run a 534 and you can flat foot it all the way around the top, awesome. But I personally know drivers who run a 549 gear at Kokomo and they've set the fastest lap ever laid down at that track. It was like a 10-1. So on the smaller tracks, it doesn't matter nearly as much. It's more about your driving style and preference. On the bigger tracks, when that track is fresh, this is the range you want to be in. Okay. Now, what about when the track slicks off though? For example, what about when you're doing a feature, right? Because when you're running the feature, not only is the track slick, but you've got probably some increased wing angle, move the wing back a notch or two. You've got it loaded up with fuel, right? You're not running heat race fuel. You're not running 7 gallons. Now you're running 20 gallons, 21 gallons. So what about that? Well, let's take a look. All right, so looking at these first few laps here, all right, the first 3 laps on the slick track. Once again, I did 3 laps around the top, 3 laps around the bottom. So here's the first 3 laps. This is on the slick track, okay, around the top. And when we look at this, we can see a pretty similar story from what we saw earlier, right? Which is that 486 gear around the top. When we can run this thing flat-footed and we can be in that fresh dirt, that's where we want to be. That gear is going to give us the greatest amount of speed, right? The greatest amount of power, and it's going to obviously give us the most the fastest lap time in terms of that, right? Because if you're just wide open and you're just trying to carry momentum, that's the gear that you want. Okay, because when we look at this, we can see that we were averaging a couple hundred RPMs less, just like before. All right, but we're 2 miles per hour faster, just like before. Okay, so that theoretical speed is not only theoretical, it's actual. It is translating to more speed on the track. Even though we were bogging it down with the wing and the fuel, it doesn't matter. Once that thing gets up to speed, it's going. Okay, now when we go to the bottom, that's a little bit of a different story. Once throttle control comes into play and now you are actually on and off the throttle, right? Like running the bottom, for example. Now it's a little bit of a different story because what's happening is you're losing a ton of momentum when you get off the throttle, okay? And there's 2 ways to look at this. So number 1 is the shorter the gear, right, which means the bigger the number. A 506 is a shorter gear than a 486. The shorter the gear, when you let off, there is a natural braking effect that takes place, all right? So when you're letting off the throttle, your car is going to slow down more, and it's going to slow down quicker than if it has a 486. All right. The reason is because that shorter gear is going to just rev up that engine more, causing it to slow down. It's like think of like a Jake brake on a truck, okay, on a semi truck. It's the same type of principle. All right. So when you're going into the corner and you've got that shorter gear, you can roll out of the throttle a tiny bit later, right? It's not a ton, right? When we're talking about a 486 to a 506, but you can roll out a little bit later and you've got a little bit wider range in terms of that bottom end torque to play with in terms of pulling yourself out of the corner. Now, here's the thing. When you've got a shorter gear, you've also got less margin of error in terms of throttle control. So if you go stomping on the throttle, you're going to spin the tires quicker. All right. So once again, it's a trade-off. I say this all the time. It's not right or wrong. It's trade-offs. And so if you're planning on going to the bottom, right? Let's say you're starting mid-pack in a feature and the track is super slick and you got the wing back and you've loaded up with fuel and you're like, dude, everyone's going to go to the top. I'm going to try to work this thing on the bottom and see if I can't knock off 5-6 cars. You might want to think about going to a shorter gear because it'll definitely help you in terms of slowing the car down. You can drive it in just a little bit deeper, but more importantly, giving you greater acceleration coming out of the corners if you work the throttle well. If you're just on off the gas, you're just going to spin the tires. Okay. Now, when we look at the traction efficiency of it, what I found really interesting was that the shorter gear, the 506, actually had better traction efficiency than the 486 gear. Now, why would that be? Because we've always heard, right? Oh, less RPMs, you're going to spin the tires less. That's true in theory, but in reality, what happens is when you're driving and you've got that super tall gear, when you do hit the slick, what happens is now you spin those tires just like you would with any other gear. But your reaction in terms of recovering and getting back off and then getting back up to speed is that much slower, right? It's that much less effective than when you have the shorter gear, like a 506, for example. And so when you spin the tires in a 506, you can back off the throttle just a tiny bit because you've got that wider range, and now you can recapture that traction and roll back into the gas and pull out of the corner. Where the 486, you know, when you're spinning the tires and then you hit it, just boom, it bogs. All right. So that's one of the things that I found really interesting was the fact that the traction efficiency was actually a little bit better with that shorter gear. Keep in mind, this was on the bottom. When we were looking at the top, it's basically the same. Okay. The difference is very, very small. Okay, very small, if any. I mean, the traction efficiency is basically identical. All right, it's within margin of error. So it's when you go to the bottom, when you're actually employing throttle control. Now, what if the track is so slick that when you're driving the top, you're actually having to let off the throttle? Well, in that situation, it's once again going to be a trade-off. Okay? Are you able to pick up the throttle enough to actually, you know, get a good run before you start spinning the tires? Probably not. All right. I mean, I've done some races before, especially lately, where the track was so slick you couldn't even get up to full throttle by the end of the straightaway. And this was at like Charlotte. It's not like we were at Fairbury. I mean, this was a big track. So it's going to be one of those trade-offs. So in terms of the gear ratio, all right, wrap this bad boy up. In terms of the gear ratio, once again, this is going to be a driver situation, a driver preference, all right? What I will say is from the numbers, looking at the data that I've looked at and collected, basically, when you're in the 410s, that 486 gear, all right, when you're on the big tracks, that's what you want to be running. When the track starts to slick off and different lines come into play, okay, and you've got the wing back and you're loaded up with fuel, right, that motor's really bogging, then you can start looking at going to a little bit, you know, shorter gear. But keep in mind that when I say go to a shorter gear, it's not like you're going to go from a 486 to a 522. I'm talking about going from a 486 to a 504 or maybe a 506. All right. So it's not a ton. It's very, very small changes. And then, like I said, on the smaller tracks, it's basically whatever is feeling good to you. And the best way to do it is take the gear that iRacing recommends in their setup. All right. Try it on your setup and see. If you're getting to the end of the straightaway and that thing's just winding up like crazy, and the best way to do this so you don't have to watch attack, go out and run 3 or 4 laps, get in your cockpit, do a replay, right? Back up your FOV in the replay and watch the tachometer. If that thing's hitting 8,700 at the end of the straightaway, let's go to a little taller gear and see what happens. All right, it's really, really simple to do. Okay, so that's going to do it all for this video. Now, really quick, do me a favor, all right? If you like this, please hit that like button. Also, make sure that you subscribe. I said I wanted to hit 2,000. We got 2,000 in like 2 days after the last video, which is absolutely awesome. I cannot thank you all enough for that. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hitting 3 and 4 and 5,000 and beyond. So, you know, please like, subscribe, share, all that other good stuff. Also, if you want to join me, I live stream every Wednesday and Thursday, except for tonight. I won't be live streaming because it's my dad's birthday, so won't be live streaming tonight. But other than tonight, every Wednesday and Thursday, so you can find the link down in the description below. Click on that, head over and follow me on Twitch. And then if you want to actually join the School of Sim Racing, you can click on the link down in below. Join our Discord server. It's completely free, and I can promise you, you will not find a better online racing community than the School of Sim Racing. That I can absolutely guarantee. And then lastly, if you want to take your racing to the next level, specifically in the winged sprint cars on dirt, all right, and you actually want to get on that path to becoming a pro, click on the link down in the description below or go to schoolofsimracing.net/pro. All right, there you'll find a page that outlines a bunch of different things, and it'll tell you all about the upcoming Road to Pro program, which we are starting on November 4th. I believe it kicks off, and there's only like 15 spots left. It's very, very limited. So if you want to check that out, links for all of that stuff down in the description below. But as always, thank you very much. Until next time, I want to wish you good luck and good racing. Take care.